guys, welcome to a brand new episode of Feather Nest Studios, where art and magic combine to create beautiful, beautiful miniatures. So welcome back if you are a returning subscriber. If not, welcome to my channel. So this is a brand new channel dedicated to creating miniatures and artwork of all sorts. But right now I'm just creating this series, which is building the Spellman Mortuary dollhouse. So if you did not see last week's video, I went over how I created the walls to the Spellman living room. And I included how to lay down wallpaper without getting creases, how to create the wood siding panels out of everyday items like chipboard from frozen pizza boxes or boxes of cereal, etc. But in today's video, we are going to be going over something that I am so excited to present to you guys because it is probably one of my favorite things about creating miniatures. It is going to be the floorboards. I wanted to break down my project into different types of sections so I can bring you guys just the best tutorial I possibly can while also engaging my own creativity and inspiration at the same time. So I didn't want to just bring one type of flooring for you guys today, and so I went ahead and made the herbal room floor, and this is what it looks like. And so, of course, it's going to look a little bit better when I put the walls next to it and it has stuff on it. But this is made out of chipboard, just like the wooden floor is. And so I used all the same materials that I used for that flooring. So all you really need is a big mat board, a Xacto knife, paint, and Mod Podge for this project. So without further ado, let's get crafty. So to begin your exciting new dollhouse floor, you're just going to grab some mat board and cut out the size that you need. So I went ahead and measured the floor in my living room area, and I always make sure to cut a little bit bigger than I need, just slightly, so then I have something to work with in case it doesn't fit. So I went ahead and tried it out inside the dollhouse. And of course, I noticed that it was a little bit off, which it usually is. And I just marked exactly where on there needed to be cut, and I cut those off. So now that you have the size floor that you want, it's time to go ahead and mark it on where you want to put your wooden floor grains. And so for me, I decided to use my cutting board grid, and I think they're each a half an inch. I might be way off on that, but I just wanted to use something I can use again later so that other floors match this floor. And in order to make the indentation in the mat board, you just want to cut along the lines. You're going to make two cuts, so one can be directly on the line and the next one's going to be slightly next to it. It's really up to you how wide you want them, and it does take time playing around to kind of get the hang of it. I definitely suggest using a ruler when you're first starting out, or even if you're really good at using a Xacto knife, it's just kind of redundant if you're trying to do it yourself each time, and it makes things just less likely to mess up. And then you're going to rip up the top layer of the mat board, and that creates the indentation. So when you're cutting it, you're not cutting all the way through. And mat board is pretty thick, so it takes a lot of effort to cut it completely through. So don't be afraid that you're going to immediately do that, but just be aware that you're only trying to cut through the first layer of paper. So once we have the horizontal lines, it's time to do the vertical ones. And so basically you want to get a ruler so that they all line up, and you're just going to draw a line down every other one. Make sure that it's every other one so we can have that wood grain floor look, because often wood pieces are placed in a pattern. So you want your project to reflect the pattern that normally happens. And so after I do the first line, I go over to the side and I do the second line exactly like I did the first one. So I'm marking all the same ones that I just previously marked down. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm seeing how long I want each board to be. And once I have that, that's when I go down the center and I do the opposite lines that I did before. So make sure if you started off on the top one, the middle one's going to be the second one, if that makes sense. And so just as we did before, you're gonna make the same type of cuts in these lines, only the difference is you're not going to run your blade down the entire piece because we don't wanna cut those middle boards, only the pieces that we wanna cut. So again, this process can be a bit tedious, and I personally like to watch Buffy or another random TV show that I've seen a million times as I do this, but it looks really cool in the end, so that makes it all worth it. And as you can see, this is what we have. And now it's time to paint it. So the only paint I used for this project was simply brown, black, and white. You can make so many things with just these 3 colors, so you really don't need much to make it look realistic. So to start off your project, you want to use a dark brown, and make sure to get into all those crevices because that's where we really want this darkness to show through. Obviously in time, dirt and other grime is going to trap inside the little wood grains, and especially in the living room where they have their fireplace. So I wanted to just make sure to coat that with as much dark paint as possible. Once you let the first layer dry, now it's time to make your wood look realistic. And unfortunately, I didn't get all of my painting on video because it deleted some of it. But basically, I went in with the darker colors first and then brought it into a highlight. So I started off with light brown. I just kept adding white, adding white, adding white, and then eventually I did kind of a little bit of white strokes onto each wood grain, moving in the direction of the wood. And then to get the pieces to really stand out, I just took a tiny brush and put straight black paint between the wood grains, and I really like how that came out. And you can kind of see my process on the sides of the video of how it turned out. And of course, to finish it off, you want to just put a nice layer of Matte Modpodge, and it helps if you have a thick brush because that will create wood grain looking texture on the top of your project. So just make sure to constantly move the Mod Podge in a horizontal direction along with the wood, and it should just give that extra layer of believability. And once you're ready to glue it in after everything has dried, I would use a wood glue because wood glue is less likely to warp your foam board. But for this, I actually used tacky glue and I did get a little bit of warping. But overall, this is how it turned out, and I'm really, really happy with the outcome. Now it is time to start the second floor, and I'm going to be making the herb room from the Spellman house. And the herb room is basically Hilda's baby. That is where she grows all of her magical plants. And I had to do a lot of research to be able to figure out what the floor looked like, because when you watch it, you realize that every episode that shows that room is basically in the dark. So I had to do some major research to see what it looked like. And as you can see here, I'm just getting the mat board ready because that I do know the size of it, and I can go ahead and do that before figuring out what it is I want to do. And if you guys can see my model, the room is going to be on the other end, which is the opposite end of the one we just worked on. So this is going to help me at least prevent some warping by keeping both sides down. And you guys are about to see a little clip of the herbal room, and this is basically where I'm getting my reference from. It looks like some checkered tiles, so that is what I am going to create. And so you want to start it off by doing the exact same process we did before, which is choosing the pattern that you want the floor tiles or floorboards or bricks or whatever it is you're making to look like. So again, I'm just using my cutting mat as a reference tool, and I'm making lines diagonally all the way down. And so we're going to do the exact same process when it comes to cutting, where you're just making lines on either side of your pin line and then ripping up the paper from the first layer of the mat board. Unlike the wood grains, you can do this in both directions if you're making tile. So instead of doing every other one, you can just run the blade across both ways diagonally and still get the desired result. And after doing this for a few hours, a little hack I learned is if you use the tip of your blade to just lift up in the middle of each section, it makes it way easier for you to remove the little paper pieces than to try to do them from the top all the way down. This just makes it really fast, and as you can see, I just move it away with my ruler when I'm done. And I don't think I mentioned this with the wooden floor, but make sure to cover your project with Mod Podge and let that dry before putting on paint. This is just to protect it from the water that's in the paint that leads to warping. We're always trying to prevent warping any chance we get. And for this painting project, I used the exact same white and brown that I used for the wooden floors, only I used a lot more white than I used brown. And then I just coated it with a simple beige. And then once I had that in place, I went ahead and just made some water droplets of water mixed with brown paint. And I did this because I'm thinking I also want to make it look like a realistic set, where if she were to be dropping water from her plants, you know, of course it'd get dirt with that, and there would be random darker spots on the floor than in other spots. So I wanted to kind of recreate that process by just adding dirt in various places like the corners and anywhere I thought. And then of course I put the blue and pink dots that I saw in the little clip that I showed you guys. And I did not get this perfectly accurate, but honestly, I just kind of went for it because I feel like the Spellman house is already quirky, and you know, I'm sure their tiles aren't all perfect. And then just the same as I did with the wooden floors, I'm putting a darker brown in between the creases just because water would run along them and carry a dark, you know, dirt or whatever. So I did this randomly instead of doing every single one like I did with the wooden floors, and I really like how that turned out. And then I went ahead and darkened even more around, just randomly around the mat board. And I also put a little highlight of white on top of certain tiles just to make those stick out. And another little detail I would say to add is to compare it with any doors and always put a little bit more dirt where an opening to a door or a window would be, because that's usually how in real life where it gets the most dirt. And here is our finished product. I'm really excited about it, and I hope you guys come back when I teach you how to build the rest of the room. But so far, this is where we are at with the herb room. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun, enjoyed it, entertainment, all things wrapped up into one. And so next week, we're gonna be diving into how I made the fireplace. So the fireplace actually does light up, and I used everyday items for that fireplace as well. So I really hope that you come back for next week so we can get more crafty and more inspiration, right? To just keep creating the Spellman Mortuary and make that turn into a real life thing. So until then, happy crafting.